Subscribe for daily videos. Sex workers of Reddit, have any of you ever have a close friend or anyone you normally interact with daily be a surprise customer? What was the experience like, and how did it affect your interactions with them? Other way around. When I turned 22 or 23 for my birthday, we went out drinking and ended up at a strip club. Stripper was making her rounds on stage to everyone sitting at the pit. She jumped on me and says my name excitedly. Only then I realized it was an employee of mine. Made sense why she couldn't work nights. Edit, I was a manager at a restaurant and had like 15 employees at the time. Was not a big time businessman at 22. Attending a bachelor party a long time ago. The stripper came in, said hello, and went to the bathroom to fix herself up. She peeked out the door and called one of them over. Turns out, she went to high school with us, a couple of years younger. She called a friend to replace her and she left. Not a sex worker, but a girl from my high school became a somewhat popular cam model / amateur porn creator. Nearly 50 mil views on PH. My school was small so everyone knew everyone, and she dated a good friend of mine for a while. As if she was fitting a stereotype, she was the very quiet nerdy shy girl in high school. I found out what she did, but made no attempt to reach out to her because I had no reason. One day I came across her porn Snapchat account, so I added it. My screen name on there is pretty much my full name, so it wasn't like I was trying to be sneaky. However, I assumed she was too busy to look at when people add her on things. Shockingly enough, she messaged me later that day and we chatted normally. She was super nonchalant about everything. Apparently another kid from our high school found out and went into her chat room spamming her real name followed by question marks. So she politely asked that I didn't do that. Seemed pretty reasonable. This was a few years ago. We are from the US, but she ended up moving to a major city in Europe. I happened to be visiting the area last year with my cousin for a backpacking trip, so on a whim I decided to send her a Snapchat saying I was in town. Again, I assumed she would be bogged down with messages from other people that she'd never even bother to look. To my surprise again, she got back to me right away and we met for lunch later that week. I told my cousin we are meeting a friend and I informed him what she does for a living, but I told him not to bring it up unless she does. I wasn't sure how open she was about it in her day-to-day life. Sure enough, she showed up to lunch wearing a PH branded Letterman jacket with her stage name on the back. Kind of set the tone for what she was cool with talking about. Lunch was fantastic, we just chatted and caught up. She said we could ask her whatever we wanted to know, so all of my questions were about what it took for her to move to Europe. She also gave us tips of places to see while we were in town. TL, Doctor, a quiet girl from my high school, who I hadn't seen or talked to in years, moved away and became a cam model. While I was on vacation, I decided to reach out to her on a whim, and we had a very wholesome lunch. My mom was a stripper when I was in elementary school. A 22-year-old guy came in and paid for a lap dance and my mom recognized his last name and asked if he knew Ruth. I have no earthly idea why she would ask him given what she suspected. He got weirded out and said that Ruth was his mom, and my mom said that his mom was her daughter's third-grade teacher. He then begged her not to tell his mom where he was. Apparently my mom just laughed and said she didn't want her daughter's teacher knowing that she was there either. I hated that teacher. She was such a jerk to me because we were poor and my mom always dressed slutty. I'm glad her kids weren't as uptight as she was. My much younger brother was getting married, had a bachelor party at a strip club with a dozen or so high school friends. After about an hour there, a rather ordinary looking stripper comes on stage, takes off her top and our tables of guys goes wild, standing and applauding and hollering. I have no idea what is going on. The stripper looks through the stage lights, her eyes get really big, she grabs her top and runs off stage to the back. Bouncers come running over to our table, thinking we're starting trouble. Nope, it turns out all of the guys in his high school class had a history class with her a few years back. She later came out and talked with us, said she never thought she'd see someone, let alone 12, she knew, it was in the next town over. I was a stripper back in the day. Halfway through a stage show realized that my flatmate's brother and his friends were there. That's how I was outed, lol. Nothing much changed. I was not a sex worker at all, but I was a fine art model for a college for a while. There were so many people that I went to high school with that entered those classes over the 2 years I worked there. Usually they wouldn't say anything and I wouldn't say anything and I would just get naked and pose for 3 hours lol. Sometimes we would chat after, but sometimes we would ignore each other and pretend it didn't happen. In the mid-90s my friends took me to a strip club for my bachelor party. A few cocktails and a few stage shows in and out walks an ex-girlfriend of mine. She was stunningly beautiful, but bat crap crazy. My friends desperately tried to get her to give me a lap dance offering her 5x the normal rate, but she refused. She said it would be too much of an emotional strain for her considering how intense our relationship was and ended. She ended up sitting with us between her floor shows and lap dances just chatting. She had gotten actually married and this was a way for her and her husband to save for a house. About halfway through the evening one of the other dancers grabbed me and pulled me up on stage, whispered into my ear, "Are you wearing underwear?" Which I affirmed. She pulled my pants down, sat me on a chair mid-stage, and another girl loosely tied my hands behind my back. Each girl took turns giving me a lap dance up on the stage. Turns out my ex paid them all for a lap dance and arranged the entire thing. Funny end to the story, after that event I was at work on the sales floor of a local big box retail chain working and in walks my ex. We chatted and half a good laugh. My lunch came and I went out into the mall towards the food court and my ex comes up besides me with a bit of a panicked look in her eye. She slides her arm under mine and leans in and kisses me on the cheek saying, "Let's go get that hot dog now." Befuddled I walk with her towards the food court and she proceeds to tell me one of her regulars was in the mall and he was stalking her. She told him she was married and he didn't believe her, so I got to play the part of her husband. I walked her out to her car after the hot dog and a leisurely chat to make sure she was safe and never heard from her again. Somewhat related, me and buddy, Tom, go to this sleazy strip club in different part of town. As soon as we walk in he sees bartender he went to high school with who say, "Tom, you perv. What are you doing here?" I'm a stripper. My friend's dad came in. I hadn't seen him or my friend since high school. I accidentally asked him for a lap dance before I could tell who it was. He said no and I realized who it was as I walked away. He came in a few more times and avoided eye contact with me. When I was on stage he would look away. Another story, my first day as a stripper I saw two guys from my high school. We chatted, then they both paid for lap dances. Not a sex worker but know a couple current/former who have worked in brothels, and they could see clients when they entered and choose not to come meet them if they recognized them, or if they just didn't feel like working at that moment. So it didn't usually happen. But on the other hand, a friend of mine slept with another friend of mine in exactly this way. She didn't mind him knowing and he didn't mind paying. When I was a cam girl I would have many guys message me saying they were my cousin or something. They were not, just trying to play out a fetish and I wasn't into it. So then one day a guy, in the main chat, said that he knew me and his name was AJ, fake name. I was like, yeah right, I've only ever known one AJ, if it's true what's my name? And sure enough he put my real first name right there in the chat. We were in youth group in church together almost a decade before that. He became a regular. Not a sex worker, but found out a girl from high school that I had a crush on was a stripper. It was my buddy's bachelor party. We load up in a van and head about an hour away to a better strip club. We get in and settle at a table. About 30 minutes in I get a tap on the shoulder and this sexy ass chick hops in my lap. She calls me by the nickname I had in high school and hugs me. She was always tomboyish in high school, never wore makeup, always competed well in gym, kinda nerdy, quiet, and reserved, but always very pretty if you thought about it. I didn't recognize her for a full minute. It was a fun reunion. It was a full nude spot and she gave no fucks during her stage performance. Really seeing everything. I really should have tried to pursue it in HS. But I was a dumbass back then. TLDR, she was a stripper and gave one hell of a show. There was a girl I went to high school with who was basically a walking stereotype. She fit so well into the archetypal ditzy blonde mold that you might swear it was an act if you didn't know better. She was also fucking mean. This girl was a power bitch and wasn't really nice to anybody as far as I'm able to remember. People orbited her because she was hot, and had everything. She never really bothered me because I did my best to be invisible, but the handful of interactions I ever had with her left me feeling unpleasant. Turns out she wound up being a pretty lucrative stripper later in life. I bought a lap dance from her, and while being nice is part of the job, it really did feel like in those brief few minutes that she did have a genuine personality shift. She was way more laid back, you could even hear it in her voice. She even commented about how she wasn't a bitch like I used to be, and I have nicer tits. It was a genuinely fun interaction. She seemed happier in comparison to the person I remembered. Kinda, sorta along the same lines, I guess. Once a friend wanted me to go to a strip club with him located outside a small town in Alabama. A young, really young, looking girl got on the stage and he told me, "Look at her. Isn't she the prettiest thing you've ever seen?" I said, "Yeah, but she seems like she's too young to be working here." "Don't worry. She's 18. "How do you know?" I asked. "She's my niece." I felt uncomfortable after that. Up here. And wow. Just wow. I was not expecting my post to get as much attention as it did. As a matter of fact, I thought it was such a throwaway comment that it didn't occur to me to even follow up on it. But to address all the comments and messages I've gotten because of it, it happened in a small club way out in the county outside a town named Harvest, Alabama. I don't know why it's so important to folks to know that unless they are expecting to go there and see the girl for themselves, fat chance of that happening. It was about 10 years ago, so I seriously doubt she would still be there. Another thing, so many are casting doubt about his character or the nature of his relationship with the girl. Trust me, his tone was that of a proud uncle, not a dirty, lusty one. You would have to know the area. Meth and opioids have decimated rural Alabama to the point that it's refreshing to find a young person that is healthy and making an honest living. Besides that, I had known him for years. You will not find a more religious, God-fearing person. Was an RA in college and had a pair of residents on my wing who were both cam girls. Found out from rumors that were eventually confirmed when I had to help both of them get back up to their room after calling the paramedics because they were passed out drunk outside our residence hall. Came into their room and saw the camera set up, dildos, and lingerie sets/pieces, just laying out in the open. I also found out that night that they had a pet kitten in the room, another rumor I heard about them that ended up being true, but also heard they abused it pretty bad. Poor thing. Anyways, as we made it up to their wing, one of the girls came to just as we entered their room and tried to play with the pet kitten. She rolled off the bed from her side, stumbled across the room in just a few steps, and ended up falling face first into the makeshift litter box they had set up for their cat. Cat shit and cat litter flung everywhere. Our campus PD was so confused when they showed up to find sex toys and cat litter everywhere. Their dorm room nearly looked like a crime scene. What a time college was. What a time. Edit, yes, paramedics were present too. I just happened to escort them to their beds and lay them on their sides until they arrived along with our campus PD. I had a classmate who was a stripper and she was very open about loving it when people she knew came to see her at work and let her dance for them. She thought it was intimate in a fun, friendly way. I had a friend who is a lifestyle dom. For those unfamiliar with BDSM lingo, a female dominant, not professionally, just personally for fun. She is into a lot of freaky stuff, but working in the public, she is very secretive about her identity. No pictures of herself online, and very cautious before meeting anyone. Well, she has had guys message her asking her for some pretty nasty stuff, like bottling her piss and selling it to them, or even making a shit sandwich on one occasion. Yes, an actual shit sandwich. Well, the fucked up part is, she messages with these guys, and they, without her asking, reveal all sorts of personal details about themselves, like where they live or work, and they would send her photos of themselves. On more than one occasion she has run into one of them at work, and they had no idea it was her. She recognized them and think to herself, this guy that begged me to make him lick his own cum off my feet. And he has no idea who the fuck I am. It would just make her feel even more powerful. Although she remained perfectly professional in their interactions. But may have acted a little bitchier than she normally would because she knew they liked it. Edit, for the record, she never did/sold any of these things. They were just requested by people she was chatting with. She is not comfortable with these things, like the shit sandwich, but it doesn't stop people from making these requests. I don't really qualify as a sex worker. I'm a guy who fucks women on camera for porn producers, so I'm not paid and I don't have customers, but one time I showed up to a shoot for a blowbang and ran into the guy who owned and operated the CrossFit place I went to. We acknowledged the connection on the set and performed our roles, but basically never spoke of it again and resumed our normal trainer/customer dynamic after that. He was married at the time, but I think they were open, not that it was any business of mine. Not exactly someone I knew well, but I went on a Tinder date with a guy, went to see a movie, nothing exciting. Nice enough guy but no chemistry at all, so didn't stay in contact. Opened my hotel door to my client one night to see him standing there, didn't react to the fact that I knew him because there's not a single person who knows what I do. Spent the entire booking telling me how sad he was we never caught up again and how he knew it was me when he saw my photos. Photos were blurred and face cropped out, but I've got distinguishing hair, and how it must be fate. Played dumb the whole time because this guy knew my actual identity and eventually asked him to leave because of how uncomfortable his behavior was making me. A guy that works with my mom found out I sold nudes, and not only did he buy some, he also sent me $50 every month to treat myself. My bisexual friend was getting married to his wife a few years ago. For his bachelor party we hired a male stripper for him, as his farewell package. We thought the wordplay was just excellent. All of us friends are straight guys, so instead of picking out a stripper for him we just called up an agency, told them the situation, and they sent someone. That someone was his stepbrother that he doesn't really get along with. It was pretty awkward. He was more professional than I think any of us expected him to be. He called the agency and they sent someone else over within an hour, a woman this time who was not in any way related to anyone there. They apparently have a bit of a better relationship now. The awkwardness and embarrassment of the situation gave them something to bond over a little. Not a worker though, funny story. One night my best mate was in town, lived in another state, used to live here. We went out clubbing and eventually decided to go to the strippers. Pay our money, and as we enter my friend notices a stripper laying on her back spread eagle for a guy. Highly drunk he yells out, "Hell yeah, how good is this?" The stripper hears and notices my friend, sits up and yells, "What are you doing in here?" My friend instantly went and sat in the corner proper embarrassed. Turns out it was his cousin. How does one even find sex workers? This is a mystery to me because this was like when I was kid and didn't know where to find weed. I worked in a brothel in my hometown. Before the brothel, I worked at a pharmacy owned by a man I got along especially well with. We had a very close friendship and mutual feelings for one another, except he was married and so we addressed the feelings but never acted on them. He always said he wished he had a time machine so he could go back in time and be with me, and that whoever I dated would be the luckiest man in the world, etc. One day at the brothel some dude booked me and I accepted the booking. When I got in the room I noticed he was my old boss's son I had met a few times when he had come to see his dad. He said he had been fantasizing over me since he had met me, which was weird because in the pharmacy I never looked decent, and it was so weird sleeping with him. He had the same smile and eyes as his dad and it really tripped me out. He became sorta besotted by me. He found me on Facebook and would ask me when I was working, or if he could come over. It was weird because he knew I had feelings for his dad and really didn't care! One day he was pestering me so one of my coworkers suggested I say to him I will agree to have a booking with him if he brings in a pair of his father's dirty underwear. He was freaked out but actually considered it. I told him I was joking and wouldn't be seeing him again. I felt guilty and weird, it was too close to home. One of my friends still works for his dad and he can be difficult to work for. She always says once she quits she will say I quit, and cat cube fucked your son. Guys from school and stuff would come in but generally I would avoid them or just decline if I knew they were choosing me because they knew me. It's just easier not to mix things. Clients don't seem to understand that it's completely transactional and that I'm not interested in talking to them for free. Not a sex worker, but delivered a pizza to a known sex worker and at the same moment I was about to knock on the door, a relative opens the door and watches me holding the pizza up to him. I couldn't do anything but laugh. He laughed too, maybe out of embarrassment, and as soon as the sex worker understood what was going on she also started laughing. Never mentioned this moment to anyone who knows my relative. And he is grateful for that to this day. Last semester I ran a massage service, and I had this one client I particularly liked because he was so friendly, positive, and just smart as fuck. I never asked my clients for their last names or too much about what they did for work, and the only thing I really knew about this guy was that he was in a STEM field. Well, fast forward to one existential crisis and a college major change later, and this semester I have to take chemistry. Lo and behold, that really smart client is now my professor. Neither of us is currently acknowledging it, but I can tell that we still feel that bit of connection we did when he would come see me for massages. Edit. It was massage, regardless of whether I'm a licensed professional. Giving someone HJ after working out their pain, tension, knots, etc. for an hour doesn't mean you didn't massage them. I sympathize for those who are victims of sexual assault and harassment. I faced the same sort of things with my business, and that's never okay, but massage therapy is and probably always will be associated with sex work, and people who engage in either endeavor should be aware of the risks involved. The people who conduct sexual assault against other people are responsible, not me or anyone else who does sex work. I am not going to call my service just a hand job service or whatever else people want me to say because a massage service is the most accurate phrasing for the operation I was running. I did not at any time claim to be a licensed professional and I was always honest with clients about it. Yes, I am aware that it's illegal. Also, for the sake of massage therapists, please do not assume they're sex workers. We surprised a friend from university that was working at a strip club to pay for her studies. She just noticed us, winked at us and did her show as usual. Zero fucks, of any kind, were given by anyone. We got a call to a club for head injury. We get there was some yelling going on in the private booths. The bouncer comes over telling us the guy is in said booth. Turns out he has a broken nose and a couple teeth missing, blood everywhere. He didn't know that his sister was a dancer, so he went to the club to ID, must have wanted to talk to her or something or to take her back home. Anyway, he gets there and asks for her and they tell him she's busy, but he hears her voice talking to the guy she's with. The guy turned out to be one of his friends and the brother got so mad that his friend was seeing his sister like this that the brother punched the guy in the face. The girl must have ended her shift then because as we were getting ready to leave she had changed back into her clothes and was leaving with her brother. My good friend used to work in a local brothel. There's a TV in their staff lounge area playing the live security footage of clients entering. So if they see a friend or relative come in, they don't have to file out with the other girls for the selection lineup. I figure something like this. I used to be a stripper, and one night at work I turned around and locked eyes with my very Mormon and surprisingly very wasted aunt and uncle. I got a story. This happened right before the pandemic crisis. I'm a male sex worker that specializes in muscle worship. Basically, I flex and let guys oil me up for cash money. You do it enough, and it's like a silly massage. Anyways, moving on. I work out 6 days a week and have multiple gyms memberships. In that process, I see a lot of people who are extremely fit. I always imagine that some of these people have to be doing what I'm doing. They drive European cars and seem to always be in the gym for hours. So one day, one of my regular Johns hires me for an appointment. Normally, I just flex, jerk off and talk crap as I'm doing it. This time, however, he springs on me that he's hiring another muscle guy and wants to watch us two jerk off and touch each other. I'm hesitant, yet after an increase in my hourly pay, I go through with it. Let me set the scene for you. Vert NSFW. I've never worked with another sex worker before, so I figured to thrust myself into the situation without any normalcy to lessen the awkwardness, if that makes sense. I figured being fully nude and ready to go would be the easiest icebreaker to another sex worker, rather than making small talk and slowly taking our clothes off. I'm in the John's bedroom. Fully erected, oiled up, and the John is getting the other guy from downstairs. I can hear them walking up as I'm very much indecent when my heart immediately drops. I know this guy. I see him every week for 3 or 4 years. We never spoke, but always gave a head nod to each other. His face went white. My penis went limp. He acted like we never knew each other, and I followed along. Hey bro, nice to meet you. 5 minutes later, our hands are on each other's dicks, looking at each other, trying to put on a show for the John. It was the most awkward situation, not knowing how this familiar stranger is reacting to my trying to ejaculate after years of acquaintance contact. I massaged him, he massaged me, it was all dandy work, and it was over. He left first and I stayed back with my John to hang out a bit. The secret to client retention: 2 days later, I finally ran into the guy at the gym. It would have been fine to ignore each other, but we didn't. We made eye contact and something was gonna happen. I said, "So you too, huh?" And with an uncomfortable awkward silence we decided to fist bump. We never said hello again after that. Used to be a sex worker, ended up in an appointment with my best friend's dad. Didn't figure it out until I was telling my friend about the very awkward guy and her face went pale. I put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly and changed the subject. I was a stripper and a bunch of rich banker guys come in. They want me to be their dancer, and I was thrilled. I spent my shift being as lewd as the rules allowed for them and got a great tip for my trouble. Fast forward to the next day, we go to my boyfriend's dad's bank president house, and there's a pile of people I recognized. Presumably they saw pictures of me and recognized me at the club. Thankfully, they said nothing to be F-stad, but they'd have me be their private stripper for the night once or twice a week. I think they were trying to spite the F-stad. At a club for my friend's 21st, and we got a girl to give him a lap dance. It's 5 of us just having a good time while my buddy is getting his crotch booty slammed by this girl. Only she kept looking at me constantly. Eventually she leans forward, asks what school I went to. Turns out she was a girl I knew who sat behind me in 6th and 7th grade. We both had a chuckle. My wife was a stripper back in the 80s and 90s. One day her guy came in, he tipped her $100 and they had a good laugh. About 10 years after I graduated college, my fraternity had a reunion during homecoming. One of my fraternity brothers was walking around with a very pretty woman in tow, introducing her to everyone as his fiancée. This guy was not a ladies' man in any way. In fact, he was the kind of guy who had no luck at all with women despite his family's wealth. So I thought, good for him. The kid couldn't get a date, and now look at him. But then I started looking closer at the woman. She kind of bore a resemblance to this stripper I remembered from a few years ago. The druggy one who used to give hand jobs in the champagne room. But I dismissed it. Couldn't be her. Later at the party, she pulled me into an empty room, looked at me pleadingly and said, "Please don't tell him." I was a dancer for about a month when I got out of high school. I don't know about now, but back then women were allowed to be a lot more handsy. I was already a nervous wreck every time I worked cause I was still sort of a virgin at the time, but what caused me to quit was this old woman and her family came in that knew me from church, and when she recognized me asked for a private dance. She was worse than most. And I ended up crying and quitting that night because it disgusted me that this woman that watched me grow up since I was 4 could act like that with me. Male stripper checking in. TL, doctor getting caught almost cost me a career. In 2007 I was stationed in Florida. Me and a couple buddies found out about a male strip club in the area and they had an amateur night. We drunkenly decided to go shake our shit on stage. None of us were worth shit at dancing, but we were in great shape and the club was actually looking for guys, so he offered the 4 of us some work. Me and one other accepted. I moonlit there for almost a month when one of my supervisors walked in with some of her friends one night. We made eye contact, she had a confused look on her face for about 2 seconds, then it clicked. She sat down, waited for me to be available, and called me over. She explained that since I was still in the AF at that time it was not okay to be a stripper, and that as of the end of the night I would be quitting or I would receive some serious repercussions on the military side. I smartly agreed to her demands, and offered her a lap dance, which she turned down. Her friend took me up on the offer instead. For those interested, the job mostly sucked, but I made good money. Women think nothing of just grabbing a guy at any given time, wherever they reach first. Suddenly having a hand wrapped overly tight around my dong and or balls was a nightly occurrence, same for having my ass grabbed, or a customer trying to kiss me. I DK about other clubs, but in ours we still had house mom who made sure everyone was taken care of for food, water, and watched out to make sure we were still good to be on stage, no one too drunk, high, been roofied, etc. Many female strip clubs have a similar role. That said, our mom was also slanging every drug available from Viagra to coke, weed to ecstasy, Vicodin to Flintstones gummies. If it might help you stay up, hard, dancing, happy, or alive until the end of your shift, he had it, or could get it with short notice. Former sex worker here. I worked as an escort in a smallish city for many years and showed my face in my advertising to prevent these kinds of awkward encounters. My partner at the time knew that I was an escort and was very supportive. One day a guy who worked with my partner booked me without recognizing me. We'd met at some work drinks a few weeks before and I chatted with him and his wife for an hour or so, but I probably looked quite different out of context. I recognized him immediately and explained that we'd met before without explaining how I knew him, to protect my partner's privacy. I said that we're likely to run into each other again as we ran in the same circles and he'd really appreciate not having slept together should that happen. He was perplexed, but keen to hang out for the hour and relax platonically just to get away from work. About a month later he showed up at my partner's birthday drinks, the penny dropped and he actively tried to avoid us both. Ha ha. I slept with their former boss as well, who I recognized but he didn't recognize me. Also slept with an ex-boyfriend's brother. We didn't recognize each other but he mentioned his very specific family dynamic and I realized I'd met him at his family Christmas a few years beforehand. Throw away. This happens a lot. My ex would hire girls for threesomes, for birthdays etc., and there were a few girls we got to know pretty well. And yes, it happens both by accident and on purpose, when people find out the sort of work they do. From what I gather it's awkward but a job's a job. This isn't 100% in line with the question, but I thought my contribution might be appreciated. I'm a bisexual male. When I was in my early 20s, I broke up with my long-term girlfriend because she cheated on me. I started lurking around on Grindr looking for some light relief. In comes my ex's uncle, in his 40s, who I had met on multiple occasions, sends me some shirtless photos and an offer of money for sex. I decide to take the high road. I don't reply, I don't screenshot and message her with it, despite being really tempted. A couple of days later, the shameless almost nephew-in-law fucker messages me going, "Oh sorry Jaffy, I didn't recognize you with your new haircut." I still giggle about it to this day. I went through this from the other angle. Back in college, my fiancée was out of town with her mother. I was gifted a ticket to the gentleman's club across the highway from the college in town and figured this to be the best weekend to give it a shot. Long story short, about the third girl to come out dancing was doing the whole head/hair swirly thing and looked down and then whipped her head up, hair back, and we locked eye contact. At the same time we both said, "Don't tell fiancé." Yeah, my fiancé's best friend was a stripper and nobody knew. When I was young and dealing with a drug addiction, I sold myself to get money to sustain this. One day I had 3 costumers. They messaged me and we met up where they planned. One picked me up with his car, one at his apartment, and the last one also picked me up by car. I take a look at him, and it was my friend's father. He was single, and didn't know I was the hostess. It was a bizarre night. I haven't told my friend and things are just as normal. We haven't had another meeting after that. For about a year before I became a mother, I made and sold content. I wasn't really a cam girl because all my business was done privately, but my best customer was one of my best friends from high school. He was a sweet kid, just a little socially awkward. It was a great experience, honestly. At first I felt a bit bad about having him pay me, but he was more than happy to do so. He's also the only person I sold to while being pregnant because I did not love my pregnant body, but he made me feel a bit better about myself. We still talk. It's been little over a year since his last purchase. He is still one of my best friends, and if he asked I would more than likely still sell him content because he was always so appreciative and wouldn't accept free content. I'm very grateful I have a friend like him. Years ago when I was a stripper, my cousin's husband came in. When I went by his table to thank one of the guys he was sitting with, he said hi, slipped me a $100 and said, "You never saw me here." I just laughed and said, "I won't tell if you don't." It was kind of awkward. He never told, and I kept his secret even when family found out, and his wife said some really bitchy things to me about the questionable morals of anyone who would work at or go to the type of place. Years ago, my and a couple friends go to a strip club. 2 strippers come over and sit by us. We end up talking and it turns out I live in the same neighborhood as them, and we have some mutual friends, including a guy I knew, who one of the girls used to date, call him A. She had just started stripping, so she made me promise that I wouldn't say anything to him about seeing her there and her new job. I said sure, no problem. Not 20 minutes later she goes up on stage, and I go up and sit by it to give her some dollar bills. About halfway through she does the stripper crawl up to me, gets real close and whispers in my ear, "Is that A sitting over there?" I kinda laughed and as I looked over said, "I'm sure it's not. What would be the chances?" "Oh shit, yet is." At the same time he looked over and saw me, and was starting to wave and say what's up, when he looked over and saw her. To this day I have never seen a human being's eyes get that wide. It still makes me laugh thinking about it. Everything ended up being cool and we all hung out together, but it's one of my favorite memories. So most sex workers screen our clients. That means we have their personal info to run a background check and make sure we're not about to get arrested or murdered. It also eliminates the chance of a creepy friend trying to secretly book us. Sex workers aren't going to accidentally go up to their relative's hotel room like in the movies. I once attempted to solicit a sex worker, and it turned out to be somebody I knew. They were recommended by a friend, so there was no picture. Since we both used aliases, did not recognize each other's names. I stripped for years in my hometown. I knew a lot of people. I have had many of my customers be friends, visible community professionals, some friends' parents, etc. It never bothered me, and unless they acknowledge it first, I don't bring it up. I didn't do anything wrong. Took my bestie to her first strip club. It was a no-alcohol joint, so the women could be completely naked. I'd quiet matters, but okay. Was trying to find someone she liked to get her first lap dance. That's when she saw it. Her younger cousin upsat down on a pole complete with vag in the air. They made eye contact. We left. On the opposite side of this, I once saw a crush of mine from HS stripping. We were 19-20-ish at the time. I think she got super embarrassed because not only my group of friends were there, most of whom knew who she was, there was also a separate group of friends there that were from the same grade in high school. When she came around, her face was red and she said, "I'm being good, I'm going to college." I replied, "I'll help," as I slid some cash into her panties. I still think about that interaction sometimes. I hope she's doing well. I had a really cool math/engineering teacher in HS who told me a story about the first time he ever went to a strip club. His wife convinced him to go as a date or something, which I thought was really weird, so they went up to the thing where like the main stage is. I've never been to a strip club, so I don't know what the terminology for things are, and looked up. The performer was one of his former students. Not just like a random student, but one of the high-achieving good students too. He said this was his one and only strip club experience, and I can understand why. About 4 years ago I was a stripper and taking college classes. A guy I was in American history with came to my club and we were talking outside in the smoking area trying to figure out why the other was so familiar looking. Finally we pieced it together, laughed about it and became really good friends while I was living in that town. He would bring his friends in and they would tip me and the girls and buy dances. He said he was helping pay back my student loans, lol. Last I heard he's in Florida living the dream and he texts me sometimes to see how I'm doing. The time it didn't pan out well was my brother's best friend knew a girl I worked with as he had tattooed her. He drove almost 2 hours to the club I was working at to see her. He didn't know I danced there, and I see him as he's walking in but he didn't see me. I ran to my manager, asked if I could hide in the dressing room. I wasn't out to my family yet about dancing. My manager said no, but he let me act like a shooter girl and wear shorts and sneakers with my top until my brother's friend left. He definitely told my brother but told him I was a cocktail waitress, which still got me in hot water with my family but not as bad as dancing did, lol. When I was younger I worked at Hooters for a while and developed a lot of great friendships with regulars. Fast forward a year and I was dancing at a place downtown and loving every minute of it till one night after a transition from main stage to a satellite stage near the back, I looked down and sitting right in front of me was my old favorite regular from Hooters. I squealed and covered my boobs before I died laughing. He had been there for God knows how long before I noticed him. It ended up being a fantastic night for tips, smile. My best friend's girlfriend used to be a stripper. After she met my friend she quit stripping and started working as a bartender at a pub. I was a manager at a luxury hotel and we had a guest who would stay with us every other weekend and get a hooker, sometimes male prostitutes too. We obviously knew about him and, like all of our guests, maintained his privacy. One night smoke detector went off in his room. New Zealand has strict laws against indoor smoking. Normally I'd get one of the duty managers to attend to such situations and I only get involved when they refuse to pay the $200 fine. Anyway, that fateful night the duty manager was busy handling another situation, so I go upstairs. Since I was a manager I had the authority to blacklist any guest, and this is this guest's third time smoking in room. I knock on the door and I hear a frantic "hold on a second." The door opens and he is just wearing his undies, and I notice in the reflection of the mirror inside the room a naked chick going under the covers. I asked him about him smoking in the room. He very calmly and arrogantly told me that it was impossible for the smoke detector to go off as he had covered it with a condom. Now, that is a literal crime, tampering with the smoke detectors. I told him that I will have to take a look at the smoke detector to see what he has done and will have to report it to the fire department so that they can come and make sure it's still functional. He let me in. I saw the condom-covered smoke detector and asked the guest to pack his bags as I would be transferring him to another hotel. I was being very assertive. Then I looked over at the lady and my jaw dropped. It was my best friend's girlfriend. She was an escort without the knowledge of my best friend. After I had transferred the guest to another hotel and fire department already at the scene, I received the hooker's call, asking me not to tell her girlfriend. I told her that's between them and that she needs to come clean as her girlfriend truly loves her and I love my best friend. She's been hurt and heartbroken many times, lesbian drama. That night I got home and my friend was acting strange. Forgot to mention that my best friend and I were roommates too. I asked her what's up and she asked if it was true that I came on to her girlfriend. I had the most intense WTF moment. I told her everything. She was in tears. I didn't know if she would believe me or her. So she called her over to talk to her. Before her girlfriend got to our place, my friend came to me and asked me if I was 100% sure that was her in the hotel room. I was absolutely positive. Then I gave her a hug and told her that I am sorry that she had to go through that and whatever she would decide to do next, I understand, and that she would have my support, even if that meant either of us moving out. I was in my room pretty upset myself when the doorbell rang. My friend came into my room and asked me to accompany her to the door to greet her girlfriend. When we opened the door, my friend just asked me to make sure that bitch couldn't enter the house. She then grabbed her stuff and threw it out on the stairs, some of which hit the cheating bitch's face. She then told her to never ever contact her or come near her. After all that was said and done between them, after the storm had passed, I made my friend her favorite cocktail, went to her room, climbed into her bed and asked her why did she not even give her girlfriend a chance to explain herself. My friend's response: "It hurts to know that she lied to me. That she cheated on me. With a man. But I could have forgiven her for all that. But I can never forgive her for accusing you of something like that. You are not just my best friend, you are my bro, you are my lesbro." We slept in her bed watching Grey's Anatomy that night. I truly miss her. But yeah, her ex is now full-on prostitute working at a brothel and has cancer in her neck. I went to a strip club in the city. Mind you, this was my first time going to one, and I found out my neighbor was a stripper. She just saw and smiled at me. I ran into my customer at a strip joint. I was working at a bank and had a regular customer who was a pretty cool dude. I went out one evening to a club and I ran into him there. We saw each other across the room and exchanged awkward glances. Laughed a bit. After that, I didn't see him again. Lol. I've ran into a lot of people I knew. A few that graduated from my high school, friends from the bar I also worked at, friends from basically everywhere lol, but the weirdest one was my second cousin. We just acted like we never saw each other at the next Christmas, and he would always leave and go outside when I would go on for a set. So awkward. Sexers of Reddit, what's the sexiest sex you've ever sexed? Commenting so I see and go me back latry all need to learn about Reddit's native bookmarking tool. I managed a car dealership and had a beautiful 17-year-old girl working as my floor receptionist. She stayed on for about 4 years while she went through university. A few years after I moved on from that store, I brought my nephews into a well-known strip club for their first visit at about 21 and 24 years old. There she was, the lead dancer was my old receptionist and looking as amazing as ever. She saw me and ran up and gave a big hug and kiss. then gave us VIP treatment all night. Uncle's street cred is still of the charts. Peas. She also worked as a Budweiser ring card girl for big pro fights. When I used to be on a sugar daddy dating site while living in my hometown, I saw a classmate's dad's profile. Being a classic boomer, he didn't even use a pseudonym, so I knew it was definitely him. In college I was a on-call stripper, bachelor parties / b-days / whatever, and twice I went to the party and there was someone I knew from HS. The first time was a little awkward but he didn't make a show of it, so besides us two, no one else knew the wiser. The second time though, it was a guy that I had a big crush on in HS but he always had a GF. I made sure to tease the ever-living fuck out of him, plus he gave me the most tips, so win-win. When I dated a stripper, I got to where I could recognize the look in my friend's dad's eyes when we walked in if he knew her. You know, I pressed that advantage. Got picked up by a client and started some small talk on the way to his place. I noticed that he had an Irish flag on his keychain and started telling him about how I'm Irish and my mom is really into it. He said that he would love to take me to the local Irish club sometime. As soon as he said that, my face went white. To go to this club you need to be a local member. My mom was the vice president of the club at the time. He knew my mom very well and would regularly drink with her at the club. He even had a picture of him and my mom together on his phone. I still slept with him and he became a regular. Me and my GF host a small gangbang once a month for fun. We invite people from site we often visit. You just have to bring something to eat or drink. I welcomed few guests and showed them in. When my GF walked in, she was very surprised to find her uncle was one of the guests. Very awkward family visit. They both kinda freaked out and her uncle went home right away. We started to screen our guests more carefully after that. Not a sex worker, but a girl I used to date at university turned out to be one. We went on probably 5 or 6 dates without me knowing. One particular day, she was acting really nervous, distracted and hard to talk to. I asked her if she was okay. I guess it was really eating at her that I didn't know, and she felt she had to tell me before we got any more serious with each other. She finally confessed over coffee. I admit it surprised me, even shocked me. But after thinking about it, I found I wasn't really upset. I asked if she was doing any touching or taking things further than just dancing, and she was very clear she wasn't dancing only. So I asked if I could come to a show. I told her I wasn't freaked out. I'm just not that worried about nudity. She was enormously relieved, and was happy to have me go to some of her shows. I got a lot of jealous looks since she paid extra special attention to little ol' me, sitting in gynecology row. I'll tell you this, she made bank. I was working as a general laborer on the weekends, and she made more than I made in a month during one good night. More power to her. She and I drifted apart, but her dancing had nothing to do with it. I advertised my OnlyFans account on my Facebook and quickly learned which of my friends have crushes on me. I don't mind them following though. Not a worker but a client whenever I'm single. Had my eyes on a really gorgeous girl in high school. We crossed paths every once in a while when I was working a job at the local grocery store. We would chat a bit and that was it. She was part of the popular crowd but was always super nice. Then one day I was shopping for a girl when I recognized her, but she obviously seemed older since high school was like 20 years ago, but still just as gorgeous. I asked her if the pictures from her ad were really her. Happens a lot that the girl advertised isn't really the person you're gonna get, we call that bait and switch, and she says yes. So I book her. She opens the door still just as gorgeous as before, but she just treats me like she doesn't recognize or know me, so I play with it. After we were done she tells me the age she put online wasn't her real age, to which I reply, I know how old you are, we went to high school together. She didn't recognize me or remember me at all. She had many bad things happen related to some mental illness like depression or something like that. She went nuts one time and drove the opposite way on the highway during some sort of episode. Went to see her again a couple more times after that. I sugar babied for a while. A guy I used to work with hit me up, clearly didn't recognize me. I asked him, "Are you, real name?" He never replied. He was friends with my ex-husband and I knew he was broke. My aunt was a stripper, but I didn't know. My parents invited me out to her workplace for a few drinks. I thought that she would be waiting tables. I got seated and right away we locked eyes from across the club as she stealthily moves into this guy's personal space and scores a lap dance, maintaining eye contact the whole time. I haven't seen my aunt since. Not too awkward, but definitely wasn't expecting it at all. I came to USA for studies about 9 years ago. As part of introducing me to the culture, and to somewhat give me a culture shock, my American friends took me to a strip club. Nice place, good dancers, and great steak. There was this one particular girl I found very appealing. That summer break I went to that club quite often, for birthdays and for personal reasons. The next semester, I became a teacher assistant, and started teaching a prereq calculus class. First lecture of my life, I walk in and see this beautiful, stunning girl sitting on the second table. I thought I knew who she was but could not place her. For the rest of the class, I kept thinking about it. I tried not to stare too much, that would have been rude and unprofessional. At the end of the class, she comes to me and says hello, we meet again. I looked at her and finally recognized her. I was pleasantly shocked to say the least. It was a bit out of place to see her in broad daylight, and in a calculus class. All this time, I always thought of the stereotypical story, I am doing this to get through college. But she really was doing it for college. We became good friends, and although my trips to the club went down in number, I never asked her for a dance again. Morals and such. She ended up getting a B+ and I shamelessly bumped it to A for all the good times' sake. She graduated with bachelor's in computational mechanics. This sub definitely keeps the 2 or 3 actual sex workers on Reddit busy. I got picked up by a new client and we hit it off fast. We had a lot in common and he was around my age when most of my clients were older. He takes me back to his house and I see a pic of him and a girl on his nightstand. Turns out he was dating one of my former best friends from high school. She stopped being my friend and started picking on me when I hit a rough patch and started to use drugs to cope. Well, turns out in college, she had a drinking problem and I was about to sleep with her boyfriend. It made me feel good to get back at her for making fun of me and abandoning me in my time of need. When he found out I knew her, he became so nervous I would tell her. I didn't, of course, but I sure as shit gave him the best sex he had ever had just to stick it to her. TLDR, turns out my new client was my ex-friend/bully's boyfriend, so I fucked him silly to get back at her. My sister opened a trucker's door only to realize it was her uncle. She was horrified and I don't know that they've been in the same place since. I once booked an escort, and the week after I saw her sitting behind the desk at the post office. It sure was an awkward exchange of looks. When I was 20, I entered myself into the local newspaper and certain websites to essentially be a toy boy for older lonely, usually professional, women. I keep myself totally anonymous, even in person I don't reveal my true name. The intention at the start was just purely to make some easy cash rather than working a hard job after studying all day. It was simply taking some women out on little dates like walks in the park, bike rides, picnics, etc. They said it was nice to have a younger, fresher mind to speak with, usually about family and work troubles, and I liked the company too, plus the money was great. Anyway, one day I received some pretty raunchy pictures from an unknown profile who'd only been active for a few days. I palmed it off at first because 1. I don't usually do that kind of stuff, and 2. It was too good to be true. She said she'd heard of my services through a client of mine, and she wanted to meet up for some casual stuff before potentially taking it further for a hefty price if I was interested. She liked the sound of how mature I was, my appearance etc., so that got me kinda hooked. After 3 weeks of occasional anonymous back and forth chat, I was able to fit her in for a Thursday afternoon coffee date near the local park once I'd finished my lecture. I'm sat at the table, waiting for lady in red scarf and long black coat to walk in. 5 or so minutes pass, and there she is, the mature student on my course who I sit besides almost every day for the last academic year and was fairly close to. I never ever would have linked the raunchy pics with her face, never. After we spoke for a couple hours, she said let's just keep it between us and acted like it never happened. Easiest £30 I ever made. My wife and I are good friends with a few burlesque dancers. Before COVID hell, we'd go to their shows all the time to support them. They even did a private show for us before our wedding. It's only weird if you make it weird. My older brother and I were roommates and close friends. He had been dating this girl and wanted me to meet her, and we were hungry, so he suggested we go to her work. I knew it was a strip club but thought she was a server or something. She comes out and I meet her and she seems nice, and after a few minutes she gets called to the stage. I felt weird watching my brother's girlfriend strip, so I went to the video poker room and ended up winning over $400 on Flush Fever. I used that money to take a girl I had been talking to on a real expensive date. It's 14 years later and we've been married for 10. Nah, but I've slept with a lot of my friends, and if any asked to pay for my services I'd think it was super sweet they were supportive of my work. I've seen a lot of posts about strippers having people they know show up to their act, so I have a follow-up question. What's the reaction when that person you know asks for a lap dance? Was at a strip club and the beautiful quiet girl I kind of knew from high school comes out on stage. I had coincidentally ran into her a week prior at my retail job where we had exchanged pleasantries, so each other's faces were fresh on our minds. Once our eyes met there was an awkward pause followed by a look of shock on her face, and she immediately left the stage. Feeling her embarrassment I hightailed it out of the place as well. So yeah, felt a bit like a disaster, and I still look back feeling a little bad for whatever chaos I created for her in that moment. I returned again after a bit of time but never saw her after that night. My GF used to be a stripper. I'm not the jealous type and was always cool with it. Pretty open about it with our friends, but keep both our family out of the loop. Not that it would be a huge deal to them, but still. One night out of the blue she texted me, "Your brother is here. We live in a pretty huge city with a lots of strip joint. The one my GF work at is pricey and clients are mostly out of town tourists that don't know any better." So my little brother showing up there was a big surprise, and before she could dodge they made eye contact. He stayed for a beer and talked to her, then left vowing to never return. He then texted me asking to give him a head up next time and to let him know if she ever start working somewhere else. I was booking a birthday gift for my boyfriend, an hour with a girl on Backpage, and thought the girl sounded so cool on the phone. I can't explain it, the vibe just felt so legit. I felt good about the booking and that it was not a trap/sting/whatever. Drop him off at the room and go downstairs to have dinner at the hotel. Realize halfway into my first drink I tried to date that girl on OkCupid and failed miserably. Not a worker but a customer. Went to get a massage with a happy ending, and the girl turned out to be a member at my gym who was a regular. It wasn't awkward, we compared notes on people and she was super nice. Then the session itself was mind-blowing because we knew each other sort of. Gave it more of a normal feeling so we could both get into it more. Saw her a couple of other times and it was just as good because of the familiarity. My partner does sex work of a kind and she always insists on a photo early on in the communication to avoid exactly this thing. An alternative, Slightly less occurrences that we've found, and have been found, by numerous dads and mothers at the son's school, on FetLife. It's always quite amusing. I've been a high school teacher for like 10 years and am honestly afraid to go to a strip club near me. Don't really wanna run into former students lol. When I was in college, I was an escort for a while to make extra cash. Men from Grindr would hire me as a younger date to functions, family gatherings, or even to go out with their friends to avoid being made fun of for being single. Yes, sex would be on the table and would cost extra but wasn't a given. One day, a man messaged me for my services and brought me to his cousin's birthday party as a coming out. Come to find out, the man and his cousin both sang in my church choir when I was a freshman in high school. It's funny to me now, but back then I was mortified. There was a girl I knew from high school that I saw come into my work one day. She is gorgeous, so of course I tried to chat her up a bit. She said she was modeling and could actually use some help. There was a bikini contest that night and she needed people to go and cheer/vote for her to win, and that it could really help her career. I said of course I'll go see you and a bunch of other hot girls in bikinis, no problem, and she gave me some tickets to get into the Cabaret Steakhouse for free. I invited a few of my work buds. We were all in our early 20s and none of us knew what a cabaret even was. The place was a few-hour drive from our town, so we hit the road right after work. Thank God she gave me free tickets because this place was like $50 to get in. The first thing I saw when I walked in was her, naked at the top of the stripper pole, upside down, and sliding down. I was blown away, and felt so stupid for not putting it all together until that moment. After her skillful performance, she came and hung out with us for a while. We all had a great night. I don't really remember any bikini contest happening, but that's okay. We all sipped like one drink all night because they were like $30 each. We didn't get together after that, and she said had a boyfriend, but it was fun. Hey, just a heads up in case any SWs here are new, be very careful posting about it on Reddit. If you're not in a place right now where you can handle death and rape threats and general abuse, do not mention that you are a SW. Reddit is full of angry gremlins, who get a lot out of harassing you. I was on stage dancing one night and looked up to see a guy I've known since I was in 4th grade and all of his immediate male family, his uncle, dad, and a handful of cousins that I grew up around. We were all neighbors, sitting in front of the stage. It was terrible. What made it worse was when his uncle said, "Damn, you've really grown up." It was the worst. Not a sex worker, but have a funny story from the other side of the stage. Many years ago, I worked at a place and had a regular client who owned a few strip clubs in the area. He loved my co-workers and I and was always asking us to swing by after the show. Anywho, one night we did. As usual, I just sat back, away from the stage, and drank my beer while enjoying the people watching. Dude, seriously, watching the antics of other guys at the strip club is more entertaining than watching the dead-eyed girls barely moving on stage. They call the next girl up on stage and by the time she had her second foot on the stage I nearly spit out my drink. Not only was it an old friend, but it was a good old friend that I had lost touch with when our old crew went their separate ways. Reed got older. Now, I don't know how other strip clubs work, but here in my state, the girls mill about the stage for a song or 5, then come down to the floor to hit people up for lap dances. I can't stand lap dances. One time a girl almost broke my nose with her lady parts. But that's a different story. This time, I beelined to her before some other schmo could have a chance. I tried to stay out of her line of vision, tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, I'd like a dance please." As expected, she turned around, then turned pale and said, "Oh no." She grabbed me by the wrist, pulled me along to the lap dance area and faked movement so she didn't get in trouble while we talked. I couldn't stop giggling at the situation because I'm a perpetual 15-year-old, which got her frustrated, affectionately, to the point that she smacked me on the arm and said stop. A little too loud. The bouncer bounced over asking the problem. She told him what was up, that we were old friends and I wouldn't stop laughing, which made him laugh too. So all in all, a good, but awkward experience. FYI, our group had gone skinny dipping together before, so seeing each other naked was no big deal. Just a funny place/situation for it to have happened again. Oh. I think I have a story that is worthy of this thread. Smile. First off, sorry for the bad grammar as English is not my first language. Second, for context, I was born in the 70s with a strong nerd gene. This was before being nerdy or geeky was cool like it is today. My life has always been around IT. Wait, where is the sex worker stuff? Please bear with me, there's going to be plenty to go around. Fast forward into the future, I'm obviously working in IT, but I also moonlit as a photographer for the rave scene, including after clubs and anything that was sympathetic to the nightlife. Long story short, this was back when digital photography was in its infancy and this type of photography was considered extremely difficult. I was in a position where I pulled off contracts left and right because, at that point in time, not many could manage this type of work and produce commercial level pictures. I had regular gigs all over because those events were all the rage at the show it all at some point or another. Then imagine going back to work. Then imagine your friends who are judging the fuck out of you. Then try to imagine what I wanted to say to make them realize all of this shit was already well beyond me. We pick the closest table. No one is talking. Their eyes are fuming, mine are dead. A stripper comes over, hugs me and sits on my lap. Starts talking about how cool it is that I came to visit, that I should bring my camera, that she was sure they could arrange something, a silly notion, that would never happen. What about the clients? OMG, stop thinking about the logistics and start panicking. One of the two said friends gets up and walks out. The second one promptly follows. I feel obligated to follow them as I would need to do a lot of explaining. And this, people, this is where it gets really crazy. I'm eyeing the environment for the first time as I leave. I recognize almost every girl who is stripping. I've taken pictures of them all the time at the club that hired me all the time, the one that I mentioned earlier. The owner of said after hours club probably had some kind of deal with the strip club to have their employees come over after work or something. Thing is, these were some of the hottest girls I had taken pictures of, and if I would have stayed, I would have seen it all. It was like being in a dream where all the hot chicks you knew were getting naked. But no, I had to run after my friends, because that's what brothers do. The ride back home sucked time. It even got me to move cities because of it. I eventually developed a small following around my photography, but that world was completely separated from my day job. This side job worried a lot of my friends who thought I was getting into all kinds of weird shit, meaning they thought I was out clubbing every night and taking drugs. If I were in their shoes, I would have thought something similar. Why else would I move far away? Mostly because I do photography in places that many people considered seedy at best. It was not a perfect scene for sure, but it was definitely not as bad as people said it was, and I was making good money. Point is, all my friends still lived back home while I barely knew people here beyond my photography work, and I almost never socialized with anyone beyond gigs. 2 or 3 years into this scenario, 2 of my best friends decide to make the trip, visit, and make the most of the opportunity by confronting me on my new lifestyle. Again, I could understand, since I pretty much worked every night of the weekend and until the wee hours of the morning to take pictures of people tripping balls and having the time of their lives. They were sure I was on drugs, nope, and that I was hanging around all kinds of wrong people, neither. So when that conversation died down, they went straight to suggesting we hit a strip club. Somewhat of a hypocritical move on their part, but back then we would go to a club from time to time, so it was not entirely out of context. They did however ask that I pick the place, as I obviously knew all the best places around here, which I did not. Fuck it, I picked a place that I often saw on my way to taking pictures at this after hours club that hires me quite often. If only I was the wiser. During the ride there, the conversation picked up again about my side job and how it has everyone worried back home. I parked the car and opened the door as I kept insisting they were all wrong, which is when I get a slap on the back from this huge guy. The doorman ran up to the car to bro it up with me. I knew him quite well, he worked at 2 other clubs I'm often working at. I did not know he worked here too. Part of me felt very happy to see him here too. I love the guy and we became good friends for years later on. Part of me was trying to figure out why and part of me was trying to assess the awkwardness that this scene had just created. Said friends were calling bullshit on me. These are my very best friends BTW, the only ones that would do the 200 kilometers drive to say hello. I'm feeling guilty as I try to explain it's not what they thought. I'm trying to appease the situation as we enter the club. Going to the coat check, the girl at the counter recognizes me, beams a smile that is worth all the gold in the world, calls me by name and starts saying how cool it was that I came tonight. Of course, I said to myself. This was a weeknight, so this is what people who worked in weekend clubs probably did to keep working during the week. That's why the bouncer is here, that's why the coat girls see here too. We actually talked all the time during work too, as we would often have coffee and talk about our kids all the time whenever there would be a lull during parties. This obviously made it look much worse to my friends. As I was about to introduce here and explain this was pretty much the same story as the guy outside, I'm interrupted by a bear hug from this girl, a stripper, who saw me through the curtains and came to say hi. Of course, she also called me by my first name. She looked eerily familiar, but I could not put my finger on where I had seen her before. It then hit me when I recognized her as being my publisher's girlfriend. I did not know she was a stripper. I only saw her whenever big events called for RS. Oh, to be present. Imagine you go in a strip club and learn your boss's hot girlfriend is a stripper here and she's going too. It happened the other way around. I'm from a small place in the middle of nowhere. One weekend when I was about 20 years old, me and the boys decided to go to a big city about 8 hours drive. You know, doing boys stuff, bars, strip club, casino, you name it. Anyways, we went to this strip club and I got a lap dance from this girl which seemed familiar. Halfway through I realized she used to be my sister dance instructor. I just paid her and nope out of there. Not a sex worker myself, but I found out my best friend from elementary became a cam girl. I was surprised to see how big her tits were. A couple of years ago I was browsing online escort ads and recognized a girl I went to high school with. I messaged her and set up a meet and got a blowjob from her. Fulfilled a high school fantasy, lol. Saw her a couple more times. Not a sex worker, but a customer. Responded to an ad in a smutty national paper, UK, went to the apartment and was given a choice of 2 ladies that day. One was the current girlfriend of the guy who had successfully made the moves on my last girlfriend, ending a 1.5-year relationship. Needless to say, I chose to spend an hour with her. She had no idea who I was, so took the opportunity to engage in some rather fucked up kinky play. As we were getting dressed, I said I know who her fella is and how I know him. She was visibly shaken and asked me not to say anything. I assured her I would not and that doing the things we just did was redemption enough for me. I've had a few people from my normal life find me online and tell me they've found me or just that they like my content. I prefer to stay anonymous, so I just ask that they enjoy on their own and to please keep it discreet. So far no major issues. I've had friends/acquaintances/ex-classmates pay for a cam session or tell me they watch my content sometimes. The only close friend I've ever had, to my knowledge, spend on my services is a friend who specifically asked if I'd be comfortable with her subscribing to my AVN page, because she sees how hard I work behind the scenes, and wants to support my business. She even offered to buy a non-NSFW custom video about one of my hobbies since I charge big on customs, and she didn't want to make things weird within our friendship by buying custom explicit content from me. I have never had any issues with the people I know who have purchased my work. They have always been respectful of boundaries, and never tried to push the line between business interactions and social interactions. My biggest issue comes from people who approach me in personal spaces, usually DMing me on my non-work related FB account, and or blatantly cross the line between our friendship and my work. People who think being friends with SW has perks. I've been asked for free explicit content, been told in great detail about sex streams they've had about me, been told we should incorporate their fetishes into our friendship because I'm so open-minded, etc. I've confronted 3 friends this year alone for disrespecting boundaries, and am now actually writing an article advising people on how to approach friends that are sex workers, or even just friends they find attractive, since many will claim the fact that I am a SW was not a factor in their behavior. If you're friends with a sex worker, don't treat them like your personal fetish dispenser. Don't expect VIP treatment. If we wanted to be more than platonic friends, you'd probably already be aware. I went to a strip club once and noticed a girl that looked very familiar and very attractive dancing on stage. I then proceeded to ask her for a lap dance and she told me that I looked familiar as well. During the lap dance it clicked for her and she mentioned how we both go to the same local YMCA. She had told me she was pursuing a business degree and was struggling with accounting, not sure how the conversation got there. About a month later I was on the stair stepper at the Y sweating bullets and out of breath when I got a tap on my shoulder. It was the stripper. We had a quick conversation and she mentioned that she was needing some help in accounting again, so being a finance major I offered my help and we exchanged numbers. I was sure that I was in there at that point. Never heard back from her. I was working in the NYC strip club, ran into someone I dated in my high school years. We were in our early 20s. We both had moved to the city and loosely stayed in touch. I turned around, we locked eyes, both jaws dropped. After our momentary shock passed, we chatted a bit and had a good laugh. He was working at a recording studio down the street and came with a bunch of coworkers. Turned out to be a good night for me. I guess his coworkers all wanted to see the tits he was banging back in the day. After that, since his job was down the street, I would often run into him while he was leaving work and I was on my way in. We'd smile and say hello. I think he got a real kick out of knowing my secret. I don't know if this counts, but I used to have an OnlyFans NSFW content but no full vagina pics. Guy who works at my local bar paid for a subscription. Luckily I'm not easily embarrassed, so I still go in. Dad's mate took a part-time job as a male stripper and he was paid to go to a party for a group of ladies. He went, got undressed and got shouted at to get dressed. His mother was at that party. I was an escort for a while back when I was 18, nearly 20 years ago, and one of my co-workers went out for a truck call. Customers chose girls based on a verbal description over the phone, e.g. long red curly hair, blue eyes, curvy build, bust measurement and age. She went up and knocked on the truck door and brightly introduced herself with her fake name. It was her father. Obviously the booking didn't go ahead, but he made her promise never to tell her mum, and he wouldn't tell her mum that she was an escort. It made things awkward for as long as I knew her, which was only a few months. She said it was especially gross that he had chosen a girl whose physical description matched his daughter. I saw a girl I had known since second grade dancing on stage once. She was obviously uncomfortable at first and avoided me for the first hour. Then she came over and said, "Let's get this over with," and danced 2 songs. It was all cool after that. There should not be any shame in what either of us were doing there. I had a couple friends from my high school who were strippers, and the 2 times I've ever been to those kind of clubs, the girls had invited me and would always keep me in their peripheral and come dance on me when they were getting weirded out or felt uncomfortable toward another patron. This happened at least 3 or 4 times in the hour or 2 that I was there. We were good friends and it wasn't ever sexual, just a way out of a bad customer. I tipped because I'm a nice guy, but I never knew how much was like the right amount to tip. 20% right? The most fun about that was that they would interrupt other girls who were trying to get a dance out of me, and then I'd spend the entire time getting grinded on but asking about how their parents were, or their pets, or retelling dumb high school stories. I read an article once from a man who said he gave up porn for good when he loaded a video that turned out to be his runaway sister. So this will be at the bottom of the thread, which means it'll never be seen. Too bad. My sophomore year in college I was pledging a fraternity. Our brotherhood chair decided to get some strippers for the chapter. When the two strippers came out, one was dressed as a Catholic schoolgirl and looked familiar. She turned around and made eye contact with me. I stood up and shouted, "Lucy?" And she responded, "Muad'Dib 1158. And then hugged me. She was a friend, not close, from high school. It was one of her first nights dancing, and she proceeded to get completely naked and have her coworker perform cunnilingus on her in front of the whole room. Funnily enough, I kept it quiet, but she didn't. When I went home for Christmas break, multiple people asked me about the event. My two sisters were at a bachelorette party. The entertainment popped out the cake. My sister says, "OMG, it's cousin Robbie." Family reunions were a bit awkward after that. Thanks for visiting Reddit Town Hall. Have a great day.